That's great. Now, you mentioned the beginning of the season and things being rather bleak. Can you describe what your impressions were from the very beginning?
Well, we started out on August 19th, our first day of preseason camp. I believe we had about 20 players. So we were a little bit worried in terms of how we were going to field the team. But that being said, I've always felt that I'd rather have a football team of 12 players who want to play desperately, rather than a team of 40 players who feel entitled to play. So we were willing to go ahead even with the 20 players, but as we continued to practice, as students got back from their summer vacations, and certainly that first day of school, I remember taking 2 hours just walking around the cafeteria, talking to students, telling them to come out to football and to give it a try. And so by the end, I believe our roster held 39 or 40 players. So it definitely, we were able to bulk up in terms of numbers. We had a few additions that definitely helped. At the same time, I think something that kind of hurt us were players who came out who didn't play in secondary 4 and decided to come out in secondary 5, didn't show up at the spring camp in June, and didn't come to the preseason camp. While I allowed them to be part of the team, most of these players didn't see a lot of playing time, and it's because they simply couldn't get up to the level you need to be at to get on the field. That's disappointing. I think some students get the impression that they can take secondary 4 off from football and come in secondary 5 and secure a starting position, when the reality is, in fact, you have to be a superb athlete and have a tremendous football mind to be able to take a season off and then come in and see the field. In fact, this very rarely happens. So while we were lucky to get some players come out, this is something I certainly, in terms of looking at the football program, this is something, a message that has to get across to the student body, that you can't take secondary 4 off. You can't not come to the spring camp and the preseason camp and expect to see playing time, and not because the coaches will hold it against you necessarily. It's not a punishment. It's just a matter of being prepared and being able to reach a certain level. So that was something that potentially hurt us a little bit. On this, at the same time, we did end up being able to get about 40 players on our rosters, and it was good to know that even with the 20 players who originally were out, we still had some backup, so we had some depth there in the end. Certainly our linemen, we hurt a little bit in terms of number of linemen. I believe we had 9 linemen total. That's on both offense and defense. So most of our linemen, in true character, most of our linemen had to put their heads down, not complain, and just play entire games. So we had guys like Evan Duffy, who generally played 60 full minutes of football. But of course, when you're playing 60 minutes, you're never playing at your full potential, because you don't get a rest. Eric Samuel was playing both ways as a secondary 4 player. This was an added challenge in terms of the linemen, and I know that by our last game, we had 1 lineman injured, Tim Storms, 2 linemen deadly sick, Phil DiGiacomo and Justin Latorella. So that left us with 6 linemen. So this was definitely a challenge for us, and this is another thing we're hoping to get a few more robust students out playing for us in the next few years. But that being said, and it's certainly my bias as a D-line coach, I just love the linemen. They have tremendous character. They're the heaviest guys on the team, and yet they're the guys that work hardest. And this year was no exception. These guys worked and played their hearts out.
That's where the game's won and lost, in the trenches.
Definitely.
You mentioned 2 linemen. Who else comes to mind as leaders this year on the team?
Well, there were a lot of leaders, actually. And one thing, when we had to decide on who the captains were going to be, it was a pretty difficult choice because we had a lot of strong leaders. One of our captains, Dan Beliveau, certainly led by example, and Evan Duffy, of course, who I already mentioned, was a captain and a leader. John Chamas, also a captain. In terms of secondary fives, Adam Nakash was not elected as a captain, but he was, in my mind, one of the defensive captains. He called in all the plays. I can't even begin to add up all the defensive touchdowns he scored for us and all the interceptions he got. He was a tremendous player and a tremendous leader for us. In terms of the secondary fours, I'm very excited with the character and leadership I saw for the secondary fours who are coming up. I saw Dylan O'Brien, who's a great leader. Matt Bytalan, of course, who was a captain this year, which is fairly exceptional for a secondary four to be nominated as a captain. But we felt as the quarterback, playing at the level he was playing, he had captain, or I should say leadership quality. Andrew Santalucia, Michael Maggio, Nick Impellizzeri, these are guys who you can count on, and they showed it by their unwavering attendance and work ethic at practices. Eric Samuel was a starting lineman. He's a secondary four, and he was a starting lineman playing both ways. So not only did we have tremendous captains, or I should say leaders in secondary five, but in terms of the leaders coming up, we're really excited. John Patrick Bigelow is another secondary four who is very quiet, but he was there every single practice working his butt off, and this is what you need to see in secondary four. So we saw a lot of potential. I'm very proud of the secondary fives we had playing for us, and I'm also very excited for next year's group of players.